Hi, this is Stephanie, and I'm going to be discussing the contingency theories that we discussed in Chapter 14 this past week in class. So an overview, the definition of contingency theories of organization are theories proposing that the best way to structure an organization depends on the circumstances of the organization. So it breaks it down into two terms. It looks at contingency in the leadership context and structure or process in organizational context. And these theories do not guarantee organizational success, but instead are ideas of how structuring organizations gets done. So the first significant individual I will be discussing is Joan Woodward. She was a British professor in industrial sociology and organizational studies. She was known for her research on the relationship between technology and organizational structure, and her study that was titled Industrial Organization Theory and Practice from 1965 recognized that successful organizations align their structure with the technology that they use. So Woodward observed three different types of organizations. The first is small batch organizations, which produce specialty products one at a time rather than mass producing their products. An example could be neighborhood bakeries, where they typically limit the number of items that they have throughout the day for fresh products and flexibility. The second are large batch and mass production organizations, which produce large numbers of discrete units, often using assembly line operations. An example could be Apple, which uses assembly line for products like smartphones and laptops. And then finally is the continuous process organization, which depends on a continuous improvement process for output or product. An example could be pharmaceutical organizations, where the production of drugs and medicines often follow a continuous process to ensure consistent quality and output. So Woodward discovered the span of control varied by the type of organization, and the span of control just refers to the area and number of direct reports for which a manager or organization is responsible for. So the largest span of control was the mass production organizations, and then the smallest span of control was the continuous process organizations. And then Woodward reasoned that different technologies are better served with different structural characteristics. So basically, she didn't really go into much detail in her study, but she did open the door for this study so that future scholars could research more and find the correlation between the two. So our next significant individuals are Paul Lawrence and Jay Lorsch. They were scholars associated with the Contingency School, and then they proposed that the stability of the environment determines the most effective form of organization. So they broke it up into two different organizations. The first is mechanistic organization, which depends on formal rules and regulations. It makes decisions at higher levels and has small spans of control. And then organizations in stable environments are more mechanistic than those in unstable environments. And then the second one is organic organizations, which has a larger span of control, less formalized procedures, and decision-making at middle levels. And then unstable or rapidly changing environments seem to have an organic form of organization. And then differences exist not only between companies and industries, but also within the organizations. So, for example, managers in different departments may have different views based on their environment. But if departments can adapt and integrate to changing external environments, the organization would succeed. And it is the same thing for companies that have multiple locations, not just within managers in different departments. And then our final significant individual is named Henry Mintzberg. So he is a Canadian academic and management theorist. He's best known for work in business management and organizational structure, and he proposed a sophisticated contingency theory in 1979. So his contingency theory suggests that there is no best way to manage an organization, but rather that effective management depends on specific situations. So there were four components that created organizational configurations that he discovered, which were coordination, roles, centralization, and context. And then, for instance, he breaks down employees into basic functions or roles. So the first one is operating core, which are those responsible for producing the goods or the service. Then there's the strategic apex, which is the chief executive or the group of leaders to oversee the whole efforts of the company. Then there's the middle line, which is the mid-level managers or supervisors who mediate interactions between the strategic apex and the operating core. And then there's the technostructure, which are analysts who perform technical support functions. And then finally is the support staff, which is the administrative employees. And then up here on the right, I added a diagram that was mentioned by him, kind of demonstrating how it all falls together, all of the different roles within the organization. And Minchberg's contingency theory is the most sophisticated of all the theories that I've mentioned so far, because it points out that organizations are embedded in a larger reality and that many parts are involved. So it's a combination of internal and external parts. And then that is basically an overview of the contingency theories. Thank you very much.